Hi, I'm John Blackburn, and this is Entertainment Matters. This is a podcast for people who make live entertainment happen. I talk with people from across entertainment and beyond to explore how we think about our work and how we put that thinking into practice. Steve Caswell, tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm Steve. I've spent the best part of 20 years, more than 20 years, working in and around entertainment for various brands. I've kind of, that 20 years I've spent has been split in two, really. I spent just over 10 years of that working in a corporate environment for Haven and Butlins. Spent a long time at Haven and 9 years, in fact. And then I moved on to Butlins, where I spent almost 3 years. I learned a lot about leadership and managing people during that time. I then went on to work in a privately owned business where I spent 9 years. And that was where I learned the business side of things in terms of running a business, owning a business, and things like cash flow and all that sort of stuff. So my career so far has been kind of split in two. And I think that gives me quite a rounded approach. And as a result, I turned 40 last year. So that was a big milestone for me. And as a result, I took that as an opportunity to start my next phase, which for me was starting a business called Next Phase Entertainment. And that launched in October 2025. So I've been running that 8-9 months now and having an absolute blast doing it, really enjoying it.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Tell us about Next Phase. Who does Next Phase work with, and what sort of areas do you concentrate on?
So Next Phase Entertainment, I started the business. One thing I learned and I heard a lot about, if that's through podcasts, through LinkedIn, through books, is when you start a business, invariably it meanders off into a slightly different direction than it can. And that's absolutely what is and has happened with me with Next Phase Entertainment. So I started it with the idea of being an entertainment providing company. And that's taken a number of different directions, really. So there's a number of things I'm doing. I'm working with some bigger, well-known brands and businesses. And I'm also working with some smaller, privately owned companies, working directly with the founder. And that's branched off into consultancy work. I think with the experience I have in, like I explained, in both corporate and a privately owned sector, that does give me a bit of a rounded experience where I can offer some help and support with people that are maybe a few years down the line with their business. They might have just started it. And I think one thing I've realized, what I do help with and can bring to the table, is that external viewpoint, an external set of eyes, but with an experienced head in terms of what I've done and what I've seen. So I think it's split into three clear areas, what I'm doing with Next Phase, and that is providing entertainment. So be that through ideas, creative. I've got a huge network of really, really talented people that I can bring together and supply any form of entertainment for you. The way I've kind of explained that section of the business is I might not be able to do it physically myself, but I can assemble the team, if you like, in order to create any bit of entertainment that you might want. Collaboration is the second arm of the business, where I might work with bigger businesses that have an idea of what they want to put together, or they might be halfway on the journey and they might want elements of entertainment and support with. So that's where I can come in and again and support what they're already doing or enhance what they're already doing as well. And then the third element is a consultancy side. And that's with both big corporate companies and with smaller privately owned companies as well. And that can be coming in and consulting on a retainer basis. I do have a couple of retainers at the minute where I work X amount of days a month for a period of time. And that can be helping enhance their entertainment. And then same with privately owned companies as well, where I can go in and help them with some of the experience I have in terms of growth specifically and strategy and team development as well. And what through creating those three arms of the business, what that's done, that's spilled out into other areas as well. One thing I've done for a client recently is create a leadership development program. I'm a big fan of people and team. I'm a big believer that if you are happy in what you're doing, then generally speaking, the results come and the success comes, because I do believe it all starts with that. We all spend a long time at work, right? As I'm sure you've read, people spend as much time or more time with the people they work with or doing their job than actually their loved ones at home. So why shouldn't we enjoy it? So of course there's going to be times and elements through the job and the business you're working with that are going to be tough, and things that you might and challenging times. I totally accept that. But generally speaking, if we enjoy what we're doing, we're engaged, I'm a big believer that success will come. So the leadership development program that I've created, that helps teams do exactly that. It's time where I can sit with teams on an individual basis. I can reflect with them, look at where they're at. We can set some goals, and we can really look at where they are on their leadership journey. Some of those are really early stages with that, and some are a little bit further down the line. So that's something I really, really enjoy. I always have done, actually. And that's something that, like I said, I didn't set out to build, but that's developing quite nicely. It's something I'm enjoying.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like, it sounds like your next phase has like can have quite a broad impact for the people that you work with through it. So you mentioned the leadership development program, and then you also use some words like help and growth and enhance a few times. So what would be some specific examples of goals that you are working towards with clients in order to help them grow, in order to enhance what are they actually doing with you?
Sure. So I think the brief started out with this is that this particular client, they wanted to have some focus spent on their team. I know through my time at Butlins, I had upwards of 40 redcoats that reported into me at any one time. That's a lot of people to get around. Even if you spent a day focusing on one person with a team that size, it's a month before you get round to the beginning again, right? So this particular business, they didn't want it to be a big corporate jargon focus on leadership. They want it to be bespoke to them. So what we've done, we've broken down the leadership development program into sections, and I go in, and the first thing with all things like this, it starts with a chat, right? So it's me sitting down with these guys on a one-to-one basis, and it's me sitting down with them, finding out where they're at, what makes them tick, where do they want to be? Because that's the other thing. Sometimes the person themselves, it can be slightly different to where their leader believes them to be. Sometimes the leader might think they want to progress, and they might not want to at that time, and vice versa. So it's a real open, honest engagement to open things up. And then I'll go back in for the next phase of the development, and that'll be where we start to turn that insight into action. Okay, so that's where we'll take what we spoke about for, right, how do we make this tangible now? How do we set some goals? We'll set some smart goals around what we want to do, what we want to achieve. And of course, one thing I always try and do, that individual is going to have their goals and what they want to achieve. I'm there to help fuse that with the business and ensure that it's supporting the business. Not to the point where it detaches from what they want to do, but the idea being that their goals, they sit alongside what the business wants to achieve, and then everyone wins. It's development for the individual, it's development for the business and their leaders within it. And then it takes it from there. So it's gone. I started with the operations team with this business. That's now looking at being rolled out to various departments, which is promising.
That's great. So Steve, just to backtrack a bit, the process sounds great and sounds really important. I hope that more companies start to do things like that. And what would be some examples of the actual goals? What are some of the things that, so when you say you're enhancing them, the companies and their entertainment, you're helping them, what specific activities or projects or kinds of projects are you supporting them in?
It really varies, right? And I think I always see that my role in that is people have a general idea what they want to do in terms of their goals, what they want to achieve. However, what I feel we don't do, we rarely sit down and reflect and take time to properly think about that. And I think that in all areas of your life, I don't think personally we do it as much as maybe we should, and same in our working life. So my job, I feel, in environments like that is to sit and get out of that person what's already there. I'm not putting goals into their mind or their mindset. I'm there to sort of help bring that out of them. So some of the things, it might be that within their role, they're supposed to do some audits, right? Might be that they're out doing some audits, but that's slipped. Work's got in the way. Day to day's got in the way. And actually, when they sit and reflect, the last month they might not have done the amount of audits that they perhaps should have.
And sorry,
So,
just to come in there. So let's go with audit. So in this
yeah.
context, within this sort of particular company's context, what are they auditing?
Rides. So in this one, so this could be, so in an attraction setting, it might be that they've got rides that they need to audit and ensure that they're running correctly and that kind of thing. So, but there's a wide split of the team as well. So they need to ensure that they're all doing that bit, and they might have X amount of number of audits that they want to hit in a month or a week.
Great. So that's good. So coming from an individual that you work with within an organization, it might be something, one of the things, I'm sure there's plenty of other things for that person as well, but one of the things might be, that's a very practical, isn't it? It's like, I want to do this number of audits per week or per month.
Yeah.
And you support them in doing that. That's fantastic. Now, if we move it up a level and we talk about the company as a whole, what would be an example of an organizational level goal that your work is enhancing?
So I think a lot of the time, and I found this with a couple of different businesses I'm working with, there's leadership levels, right? And the people within those levels want to progress. And I think there's usually the leadership and the leadership team around it have their idea of what these team need to do to progress. And the team themselves have their idea what they need to do to progress. And it doesn't always join up. It doesn't always join up. So I like to think that I'll be there to make the team aware of, look, this is what the leadership expect, because I've had those conversations as part of the initial brief. And same with the leadership, just so they know this is where you guys are at and what they're thinking. Because you'll be amazed, I think, and again, for a number of companies that I've worked with, you can be amazed that there can be a little bit of disconnect at times.
Definitely,
in terms of what people are thinking. So I think in terms of the wider organizational viewpoint on it, that's exactly what I can and have come in and done, is join those dots up in terms of what the expectations are of moving to the next level. Because that's the thing as well. Sometimes with the team themselves, they can sit there. Everyone, well, not everyone, but the majority of people want to progress, right? People like the idea of progression. However, sometimes when you map out exactly what the expectations are of getting to that next level, and then what the expectations are once you're there, that can do one or two things. It can kind of drive them on. Okay, what do I need to do to get there? Or also, it can hold a mirror up to go, I'm not sure I'm ready to be there, or I want to be there as well. So that's what we can then put some tangible things in place. So what do you need to know to get to X level, and what can we do together to put those things in place?
Yeah, that's fab. And so you mentioned next level a few times. So just give us an example of what a next level might be for someone.
So that could be starting in from a more junior leadership level. So a more junior leadership level in terms of you might just be responsible of some more things. And then the next level of that is having some team below you. You've got responsible, because certainly in my experience over the years, being a manager, so to speak, is one thing, but being a leader is something very different. I'm a big believer in the difference there. So, once you bring people into it, you've then got to manage and lead people. That changes things. So I think that's where all of a sudden then you're being responsible for people that are working underneath you. So that kind of changes the game a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. That's lovely. That difference between management and leadership is something is huge, isn't it? It's talked about quite a lot. So what would your sort of definitions be, or what would your yeah, what's the difference for you between, a good manager and a good leader?
$1 million question, right? I think management is sort of tell and do. I think to manage things, things have to happen, and you've got to manage and direct the people that are involved, um, and the job's just got to get done at all costs. Is where I see management. Leadership is something different altogether in terms of that's taking people into account. We're all different. We all have different drivers and motivations, and I think when you talk about leadership, you're talking, right, how are we going to get this done? But how am I going to bring the people along with me? And I think the best leaders I've had over the years, I think, are people that I've wanted to do what it is we're doing for them, rather than for the
Very
sake of just
nice.
doing what we're doing and managing our way through it. I think there's a huge difference, and the good leaders tend to be the one that we remember. We've all had bad leaders and bad managers, I'm sure. And I also think that's important as well, actually, because I remember from the bad managers I've had, if you like, over the past, or bad leaders, I remember that just as much as the good times, because then I'm fully aware of, maybe what I don't want to do moving forward, just as well as the good parts as well. So yeah, I think I think as well, I'm a big football fan as well, and I if I can get a book that links, football and business, then even better. And there's two books that come to mind. There's Alex Ferguson Leading, and Simon Jordan's book as well, that were both brilliant books I love. And what I love about Alex Ferguson's book, he talks about leading people and the fact that you do need to make provisions. He talks about having superstars on his team like Ronaldo and Rooney over the years. And he directly addresses the fact that, did I treat them differently? Yes, I absolutely did, because they were superstars. So I think that's really interesting, because I don't believe there's a blanket approach to leadership. Everyone's different, like I said before, and we do have our intricacies and our different ways of being. So for me, a good leader sees that and sees that people are different, and we need to treat people different in order to get the best out of them. Absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, lots of people talk about it, but like a Brené Brown or a Seth Godin or someone like that will talk about enrollment, won't they, as being one of the differences between managing and leading. That idea that and you said it, that sort of managing is telling people what to do, and leading is sort of bringing them with you,
Yeah.
of their own accord. That's nice, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, lovely, Steve. Thank you. So you've told us there, that's some great stuff. You've given us some really nice insight into what you do within that sort of leadership development stuff that you're working on currently. What about the other areas of next phase? Because I know that you also, uh, as you mentioned, you're involved in different ways within entertainment. So give us some other for the other areas of the company's work. What would some other sort of specific goals or projects be that you might work on with a company?
Yeah. So I think if we move over to the side of the entertainment in terms of providing, I think the three pillars I spoke to you about in terms of what I do at Next Phase, a lot of time they kind of blend into each other. And one example, I think, quite a big UK national brand that I've been working with, um, early on this year that started. What they wanted to do is, I think a lot of the time entertainment can be a last minute thought, and it can
Mm,
be an afterthought, should I say. And I think one of the companies that I work with engaged me because they have entertainment and they're supplied entertainment, but it's not with much thought or feeling. And it's kind of, so as an example, they might be provided an act or a piece of entertainment put on in the corner of the room, not much thought about it, not much thought whether it was right for the audience, whether it was right for the business, whether it was right for that person performing. So they wanted some support in terms of building more around those events. So rather than just, chucking someone on in the corner of the room, let's actually think about what this audience wants and what
Awesome.
might
So,
be
Steve,
relevant.
tell us about that. Tell us about that. So, what does thinking about what this audience wants? What does that mean? What does that involve? Sort of. Now, you don't have to give any secret sauce away, but give us some broad strokes ideas. So that situation that you've described is one that anybody listening or watching this podcast will be really familiar with. They'll either be familiar with it as an audience member, or they'll be familiar with it as a performer walking into those situations and going, well, hang on a minute, what do you want? What do you mean you want me behind the vending machine? So give me an idea. What kind of process is involved in when you discover a situation like that? What
Yeah.
kinds of things can you then go in and do to change that?
So I think it's environment is a big factor, right? And in terms of entertainment, I kind of think if we look at some examples, it could be really simple as let's take an act as an example. It could be the type of act you might be having. There might be off season, so kids are at school, which means generally speaking, you've got some tots in there. So the last thing you're going to want to do if you've got a venue is have, let's say a Neil Diamond tribute act when you've got some, young families and young tots. Actually, that might need to be something a little bit more bespoke. It might need to be something that's geared more towards younger families, and also time of the night. I've been in environments over the years before where, like I say, it could be kids are at school. In that example I explained there, generally people are in with tots, which means early nights, and you've got a Tom Jones tribute act on at 10 o'clock at night. Well, and then people are surprised that there's nobody in the venue, because actually they've all had an early dinner and they've all gone home early. So actually that wasn't fit for purpose at all. And I understand there's a commercial reality and we want to make money in different areas of the business and that kind of stuff, but it's got to be right for the audience and it's got to be relevant as well. So I think that's where you're looking at where your entertainment's coming from. Do they understand your audience? Do they understand your environment? You've got to look at the guests, and then you've got to look at the business itself, because of course there's budgets involved. There's parameters around what can be performed. So I think you need to take all of those elements into account. And I think too often things just get thrown. Things just get thrown at people that work for maybe the people doing the throwing.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Steve, because again, as I think about the spread of people that might be listening to this, I hear things like that all the time from, like, I'm sure you must do as well, from each different perspective. It's sort of cultural, isn't it? It's like, well, this, we've always done it like this, so we've just kept doing the same thing. Yeah. And we've never stopped to ask the question. When I think about some of the kinds of questions that I might ask people, because I'd be interested in knowing what your questions are, but it's like, what is this for? Who is it for? And how would we know it was working? They're my sort of classic questions to ask in that sort of situation. So yeah, what about you? When you're going in and you're met with that situation where it's obviously wrong, it's wrong as soon as you walk in because you've got all that experience. Now what happens? What do you do now?
And I think you alluded to it there. That's really key in terms of it all starts with a conversation, generally speaking, with that business, right? So what are we trying to achieve here? Are we putting some entertainment on in the corner of the room because we just want to make some money on the bar? And do you know what? There might be an aspect of that. Fair enough. That's a commercial.
That's a business goal, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And totally accept that business needs to make money. However, you need people in the room to make the money. Right. So if nobody's in the room, well, nobody's winning. Least of all, the people doing the entertainment themselves, whether that's a team performing something, whether it's light entertainment, a show, an act, that really gets thought about as well. That can be, I remember, when I first started and I worked on smaller holiday parks and off season, you'd be performing to 2-3 tables in the room. And that's tough. I've always thought that performing to a full, busy room is great, and that's actually the easier part. But when it's not very, very busy, that's when the challenge comes, I think. So I'll go in and talk to whoever's responsible for that entertainment, I generally start by talking to the seniors, the senior exec team, or even the owner of the business. But I do like to find my way down to who's responsible for booking and part of the entertainment as well. And actually, we'll sit together and exactly like you allude to, what we're trying to achieve here is the entertainment the focal point of why these people come to this venue or place, or is it a subsidiary element? Is it here to enhance what we're already doing? And what do we want people to go away thinking? So do we want them to go away saying, well, we just went in there, we heard some music, fine. Or do we want them to go, that's brilliant, that really made my stay here, whether it's a hotel, a holiday park, an attraction, whatever that may be, because entertainment can have different levels of importance, right? Whether if you're a theme park, it might be put on a show stage there to alleviate some of the pressure on the queue for the rides, because generally speaking, people go theme park for the rides. So the entertainment is there to be a subsidiary element. In a holiday park, it's a bit of a different story. People are going in that venue for the whole night. Their expectations are much higher of that entertainment, and they're there for the evening. So I think that's one of the real early things is, look, what we're trying to achieve here. Then comes the natural things, right? What budget do we have? How are we going to get the best out of it? That's something I found in the time I've been doing this with Next Phase is people sometimes they can have unrealistic expectations of budgets. Both ways as well. I might have. They might, I've had people say, "Well, I've only got this to spend," and I look at the budget, and with the experience I've got, I think that's good. That's a healthy budget. You can get some great things in there. And one particular company I work with, we're working to really enhance their entertainment offering, and they're happy to spend the money. They've got some good budget behind them, and I'm really confident. And you'll see that across my channels over the next few months that we're going to really bring that on, and that's going to be a great offering. But it tends to start there as well. Once you've answered those questions, right? What is our offering here? What are we trying to achieve? How are we going to put that together? And I think, sadly, there are times when that is a bit of an afterthought. So yeah, that's where I'll come in at that point.
That's fab. Thanks, Steve. And again, that brilliant word, which is obviously important to you, like enhance, came out again there. So in the case of that company, again, without naming them, what is it that they're going to do differently now? What is something they're going to develop that will enhance their entertainment offering?
So what I'm doing with that particular company I mentioned is thinking about the guest. So it might be that what they're doing is quite transactional. Have elements of entertainment that just appear, they come, and then they go.
So what would be an example of that? What would be an example of something that was might be seen as transactional, as opposed to what you're going to do now?
So that might be an element of entertainment. Let's say it could be bingo, it could be an act, and it just appears on the stage, and then it finishes. And there's nothing put around it. So that's, for me, a real easy win. Right, let's bring the guest in on that journey. It sounds simple, but let's tell them what we're doing ahead of time. Let's be that through announcements in the venue, around the venue as well. How can we let people know what we're doing? And one thing as well, going back to what we spoke about when I talked to the people providing that particular entertainment, I think what isn't done very much is talking to the guests themselves, because we all have an idea of what our guests want, and a lot of the times that's right. I think big companies like Disney, they know what their guests want. They're really clear on what their guests want, but sometimes we can fall a bit short there. So I think, hey, look, how are we going to know what the guests want unless we ask them? And I think there's things we can do around that in terms of questionnaires and that sort of stuff, and feedback through socials. But actually sitting down and physically asking them when they're there, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I absolutely champion that. Go and find some guests and talk to them about it, because I tell you what, they will talk to you. They will be so happy that you've asked the question, and they can offer up their thoughts. And that's invaluable, because, who knows better than what your guests want than your actual guests?
Steve, I love it. That's great. Thank you, man.
Bingo.
Absolutely love it. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So, you've described so far the sort of prongs and sort of facets of the work you're doing with Next Phase with these companies. If we were to sort of move on a little bit now, you gave me sort of three bigger areas that you said you were particularly interested in. So I wonder if we could just sort of move into getting you to talk about those now, because they sounded really interested to me. So the first thing that you mentioned you thought that was this idea of the relationship between creative and operations within entertainment, and the fact that that relationship is important. Now, you at the time used the word conflict, and I want to explore. I want you to get you to tell me what you mean by that and all that kind of thing. Tell me about that.
Yeah, John, I can confirm I'm not afraid to use the word conflict
Go
with
for
this.
it.
I think this is really important, actually, and I came through, if you like, in the operations side of the business, particularly when I worked for a privately owned company. I wasn't a singer or dancer myself. So naturally, I fell along that side of the business, and that's a business side of the business that always fascinated me as well, and interested me. The idea that if you see a show, as an example, on the stage, all of the work and all of the people that have been involved to get that there, that really interested me. And I think the two real key areas there are the creative and the operations functions. And I think, like we say, we use the word conflict there. I think healthy conflict is what I'd label that, because I think that does need to happen. And I think in its rawest form, you have the creative side of the business that wants whatever's on that stage or whatever's in that environment to be the absolute best it can be. And that's not to say the operators and operation side of the business don't want that, but the creative at all costs is going to have all of the elements. It might have aerial, it might have the best screen content you can get, it might have the very best people with the best credits working in that environment. But, and here's the but, is we all have budgets to work with, right? We
Yeah.
all have budgets. So it might be that the X amount of budget you have for this show, in order by doing all these elements, you can't have all those things. So that's where the operations side of the business has to come in, and ensure that we've got some parameters to work around. And so, as an example, you might have a choreographer who's got some amazing credits, and but they live overseas, so you need to pay to get them over here. You need to pay them accordingly, and rightly so. But that might not fit with the budget. So you got to find and use what's available. Having said that, I think working the other side of things, I don't think the operations can blunt what the creative's doing, because I've seen that before as well, where we lead with the budgets or we lead with the commercial element of the project, and I don't think that's right too, because I think that's not where you get the best creative. And there's some amazing creative people out there, creative thinkers and creative people that are capable of some amazing things. So I think there's that sweet spot right in the middle. And the reason I use the term conflict, because at times there is conflict. And I think, the creative side of business, they tend to be very, very passionate people about what they're putting together. And again, that's not to say that the operators aren't, but they're creative, are passionate, and quite often emotion-led people. And sometimes the operating side of the business can be people that are more commercially focused, and they can look more at logistics and that kind of thing. So I think if you can get to that point where they can work together and they can see each other's side, that's the other side of thing. I've worked with some amazing creatives that totally understand the operation side of the business, and vice versa. Then I think you're onto a winner if those two areas of the business can coexist in relative harmony, because I think it's good at times, because I think they should push each other. I think it'll be easy for the operation side of the business to say, no, we can't do that, we don't have the money, or that's not possible. That's quite often the most dangerous term you can say to a creative is not possible. Because quite often it is, or there's a way of making it possible. And I think if they can coexist and they can work together, then usually something really, really brilliant will be created as a result.
Yeah, fantastic. So how do we do that, Steve? What is the right mix of conflict, as you put it? And then you also then mentioned harmony. So we've got conflict and harmony, which have got to come together somehow, haven't they?
Yeah.
So how do we do that?
I think clarity and communication is really, really key. So if we look at it as two sides of the business, it's creative are off over there creating and the operators are over there operating. Before anything happens, is for those people and perhaps the leaders of those areas of the business to sit together and agree on all areas of this particular project. So I think that may take some time, but I think too often the creators are running off creating and the operators are running off operating, and they didn't have that clarity and communication from the early stage of the project, i.e., I'm going to be off doing this, this, and this. For example, if the creators are off working on all of the aerial elements and what sort of elements they're going to use and who they're going to use and how they're going to do it and the costuming involved, and all of the creative elements of that, but that's not physically possible within the budget, that conversation needs to happen early doors. And likewise, if the operators are putting around the budget, right, we're going to be using X amount of people, or we're going to be working with a cast of 6, whereas the creative need 8 in order to achieve what they're trying to achieve. Right. Well, we need to have the conversation here, because it's either going to be 6 or 8. It might end up being 7, or it might be 4, but we need to have that conversation early doors to ensure that everybody is really aware of what's going on. And then beyond that, I think there's got to be those check-ins, because there's a real danger sometimes of those areas working in silo. Because generally, and the other thing to address here, they tend to be quite different people in their outlook and their approach. So I think, let's lean into that. And I think if we can have those check-ins along the way and make sure that we're both aware of the project, because we're both aligned in the fact that we need to deliver for whoever the client may be. And if the client, that's the point, if the client sees through that and there tends to be some issues there, that's not good for anyone. So we want to, that conflict I discussed, that's should be behind the scenes. That should be happening organically as well. And I'm not talking about people shouting and screaming and throwing stuff behind the scenes, albeit that does happen, as we know. But I think, let's get on the same page as we can be and help each other. Hopefully the operators will see things from the creative point of view and vice versa as well. And that's where I think the good stuff happens. Communication is definitely key all the way through the project.
Yeah, fab. Thank you. And so that's interesting. So what we started with the word conflict, and then what we ended up with was working together.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, and of course that's got to be how it goes, hasn't it? Yeah, we started with conflict, we went to sort of working together, and then what came out, I guess, was like something like structure, because you mentioned this first meeting and then check-ins and all. What would be an example of a structure that can take us from potential conflict to working together? So you've mentioned getting the right people together at the start, and you mentioned the head, senior people creatively, senior people operationally, and perhaps the leaders of the whole organization.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned these check-ins. So what else needs to be present apart from just agreeing to meet and to talk?
I think those people in those roles need to be the right people. And by that, I mean, they need to be open-minded. They need to be conscious of the different areas of the business, i.e., I know you're over there trying to do the best what you're trying to do, but also appreciate that's exactly what I'm trying to do as well. And that's where I think, some of the needle, should we say, does come into it, because everyone's just trying to do the best job they can do, right? And trying to achieve exactly what they can achieve. There's no point putting the best product on the stage or wherever the environment may be for your client at the end of it if you're 100% over budget. There's just no point, because they might say, great, this looks brilliant, but I won't be working with you again. And then nobody wins in that instance. So yeah, I think that structure, and I think that can be really simple depending on the length of the project. It's got to be regular. It's got to be regular, and it's got to be open as well. What are you trying to achieve out there? And that might be where, it starts from the creative side, letting the operators know what we're trying to achieve, because that's not going to go against what the operator wants. They want amazing product at the end of it, especially the fact that they tend to be the front line with the client as well. So if it's not good enough, they're probably going to get it in the ear. So, we're all on the same page in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So yeah, I think exactly that, the structure along the way, even if there's no update as such. So let's say you have a weekly meeting planned in, you might both get together. I'm working on this, it's going great. You're working on that, it's going great. It's not actually much to discuss here. Right, well, I'll see you again next week. I think there can be a tendency sometimes things are going well, communication and structure can drop off, but actually that's probably the most important time to keep it going, because
Right.
that's when we need to both know that we're aligned, that things are going as we expected them to go. So yeah, absolutely, the structure is key. As an operator, I will of course say that.
I would imagine that everybody would agree with you, Steve. That's great. So if we've done the kind of the macro structure. Okay, we initial meeting, check-ins. If we sort of zoom in a bit, let's go to one of those check-in meetings. What are the key bits of conversation that have to happen in a check-in meeting so that you keep everybody aligned?
You have to bear in mind what the client wants.
Mhm.
So, let's go back to the whatever this work may be that you've won and you're working on. What was it the client, like we spoke about right at the beginning, what is trying to be achieved here? So are we on the right path to that? That's the first thing to be discussed. And then I think there's some key areas that come to mind: time frame,
Mhm.
budget, and challenges. I think those three things definitely need to be explored at every touch point. And just to touch on those, I think time frame is a simple one. Are we on time to deliver what we're trying to achieve here? And all elements of that as well. I want to have this set built. I want to create this screen content, but that's going to be 2 weeks later than anticipated. And look, that will come, and that will link into the last bit in terms of challenges. That there'll be instances like that. Every project has, hiccups along the way, and it's how we approach that. Do we do something different because it has to be within the time frame? Can we speak to the client about pushing back? Is that possible? And that's where it's really key, because we can work together. Budget. I feel like budget and money can sometimes be a bit of a dirty word, but actually, is of course we've got a budget to work with here. Of course, every project I've ever worked on had some form of a budget around it. And I think sometimes it can seem, like I say, a bit of a dirty word, but let's address it up front. Where are we in terms of our spending? And it might be we're being creative with the budget as we go. For example, we might have had X amount planned for set and scenery, and X amount planned for costume. We've overspent there, but we can underspend a little bit there to get it back. That's absolutely fine. But we need to have that conversation as we go. And then the last of the three I mentioned, the challenges, tackle those head on. Because again, in my experience, the challenges that are there and the conversations that don't happen, it builds up and creates a much, much bigger problem down the line. So I think if we're really open about those elements of the time frame of the project and what we're trying to achieve, the budgets around it, and tackling any of those challenges head on, because sometimes when you're really deep in what you're doing, somebody's external view or from a different department or element, they could give you some fresh eyes and give you something you not quite think about. And that's where I think we can help each other through those different elements. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Thank you, Steve. That's really interesting. The work that you've done in previous organizations and the work that you're doing with Next Phase now is, it's across a ranges of range of sizes of enterprise, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that everything you've just said there would be pretty interesting, whatever size of operation you're working at, right? Because no one in entertainment is doing this completely on their own, right? even if you're an act and you think of your business as just being your act, you're working with partners at venues or
Yeah.
wherever it is. And yeah, I think that do you know that thing about regular communication is something that's just everyone's talking about how important it is. Everyone that I've spoken to. What do you think are some of the obstacles, perhaps, that prevent that kind of regular, clear communication? What is it that gets in the way for people?
I think you're right. I mean, communication can be a bit of a buzzword at times. You know, we all know we should be doing it. You know, in our private lives as well as our working lives. Um, but the reality is, if something's easy to do, it's also very easy not to do. And I think that's part and parcel of it as well. I think entertainment as an industry or leisure, there's a lot of really passionate people. And I think certainly in my experience, we can all be guilty. I know I can at times of just getting our head down and focusing on our area of the project. And
Mm.
I've seen it in businesses that I'm supporting as well. I might be working with the founder or the senior team of that business. We're so focused on the area that we're responsible or involved in that sometimes we neglect to be super aware of what's going on around us. So I think that's where it comes into it is having that awareness of what's going around, and also that appreciation that I could do the best possible job in my area, but if that falls down over there, none of us are going to be successful. So actually, as much as I might not physically be doing what you're doing over there, a result of what I'm doing can really support you in what you're doing. So that's where we absolutely need to come together, and we all need to do what we're doing in order to make the whole thing successful.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Now might be a good time just to move us on to one of the other things that you mentioned that you're really interested in.
Yeah.
This idea of ensuring that you have the right commercial mindset. If we assume for a moment that most of the people um, listening to this probably are coming from, let's call it the more creative side of the work. What do we have to do to get some of that commercial mindset? Like, what do we have to be thinking about? What kinds of questions do we have to ask?
Yeah, I think it's really important. You know, we talk about all businesses need to make a profit, right? And that's not just to line the pockets of whoever might own that business. It's to run that business. And there's a lot of elements involved in terms of the overheads of what that business payroll, all sorts, and now as tough as it's ever been. So I think I don't think we have a choice. We have to be commercially aware, and we have to ensure that we're getting the best bang for our buck, and we're ensuring that each project is is doing exactly what it needs to do in terms of the commercials around it. I think in my experience, certainly when I was in a position where I'm working directly with the clients themselves, generally speaking, the clients that you work with, a lot of them are commercially minded. They might be, senior operators. It might be the MD, the COO, um, whoever it may be. But they've got numbers they need to hit, and they want the best project. I've no doubt, and the best quality at the end of it. But you do need to think about the commercials, and you use the example there of an act. They'll be thinking about that, even if they don't think they're commercially minded. They absolutely will. If they live in Devon and they're accepting a gig in Scotland, the first thing they're likely going to do is figure out how much petrol it's going to cost to get them there. So I think, commercials isn't just budgets on a spreadsheet. I think that's, I said before about sometimes it can be a bit of a dirty word, but actually commercials involved in all of what we do. And I've worked with some creative people who are brilliant with the numbers, brilliant at the commercials and that kind of thing. And I think, like I say, in the world we live in currently, I think it's more important than ever to get a handle on it. And I think, as an example, I've put decks together over the years of it might be for tenders and that kind of thing. And I've known the people that I'm working with. Sometimes I'll put the budget at the back of the deck, and I'll give all of the pitch first, and then here's the numbers. Other times, depending on the person, I might put the numbers first because I know that person's not going to listen to me. They're going to say, I'm not even listening because this is going to cost me a fortune. And then you put the numbers at the end, and actually you've not give a fair go at exactly what you're trying to pitch. So I think being aware of that is really key. And some of the decision makers at the other end, they may well be commercially focused. So we've got to meet them in where their understanding is.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that, by the way. That there's like a moment of genius there, isn't there? Even just deciding in a presentation whether to put the numbers at the start or at the end, depending on the nature of the person you're talking to. That's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thinking more along the lines of sort of practical things like that and ways of thinking. Let's say we should do it from both perspectives, right? So if you consider yourself to be more on the creative end of these things, what can you do to start getting a perspective and understanding from that, getting more of that commercial perspective? So for example, I'm just trying to think of an easy way in. Might be something like, obviously you've mentioned, we understand that numbers are going to be involved, right? Fine. What are the numbers that are worth looking for? What are the real basic numbers that perhaps we would benefit from understanding in order to be able to maybe speak the language of the commercial or the operations side?
Yeah, I think one thing I'm a big believer of, I think what we can do sometimes and be guilty of is the people involved in the creative element, or we can just give them their budget, if you like, what they're working with. Whereas actually what I think is really important, is something I've always tried to do, is bring them in on the journey for the bigger picture. So I'm talking about the whole thing here, even things that are not involved with. So the payroll element of it. And I think that gives a look, here's the overall money we've been given by the client, right? We would like to make X amount out of this. We need to spend this on payroll. We need to spend this on consumables. We need to spend this on the creative element. I think certainly for creative, but all people in the project, I think it's a good idea to bring everyone in the whole bigger picture, because then it helps to understand, why have I got this amount to spend? Right, because that's what the bigger picture is. And we want to make money as a company because we want to reinvest in the company, in the company in terms of what we have, the people behind it, the infrastructure, all of the things that come with running a business. So I think bringing them in on all elements is really key.
That's great. And that also obviously dovetails beautifully with what you said at the start about like an initial meeting with everybody, right?
Yeah.
That's great. So so one thing that could help people that identify as being on the creative side, more inverted commas, one thing is getting an understanding of the big picture and why they might have a certain amount of money to spend on whatever the project is. Okay, great. What else can people on that creative side do? What questions can they ask, maybe directly the people on the commercial side, to better understand that commercial perspective?
What would be really, really helpful for them is to understand the operations side of the business, right? They're going to be out, and they might be buying consumables, they might be buying elements, they might be supporting with elements, with costuming, all sorts of sides, and cost change, right? Cost change, and sometimes things can happen. I remember there was a project I was working on a few years ago where we were buying some containers, and some conflict happened in the world that directly resulted in the cost of these containers going up by 4. So you're talking about something that was, £2,000 becoming £8,000, and that was pretty much overnight. So that massively affected the project, right? Because then we're kind of going, right, what have we got to spend? We didn't want to go back to the client with it, but we're talking about exactly what we're doing there. So I think them being aware, and again, it takes us back to that communication and checking in. Look, we've got some challenges over this side, which we're trying to move forward. Is there any way you can support with what we're doing? So And likewise, more money might come available as well. So look, let's put that in, and payroll's a big part of it. People that are involved in what you're doing need to be paid, whether that's an actor, a team. We can plow all the money into the creative side of what you're creating, but if you're paying peanuts for the people to perform it, then it's not gonna marry up, and they're not gonna have the passion to be involved in it that you'd want them to do. So it all needs to tie up. So the creative people need to know what you're planning on paying that team. They might not see that
Right.
as a direct responsibility of theirs, but they need to know, because that's going to affect things. If you want people of a certain level, you need to pay a certain level. So I think it all ties into why it's so key that everybody on the project is aware of what everybody's trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's great. And what if that's fantastic. Thank you. So the creative people on the creative side, again, more air inverted commas, can ask questions, can do things to maybe make themselves more aware of the bigger picture, including even the fact that, well, and it's especially relevant as we record this conversation, right? That, even world events can
Yeah.
have significant, even if they seem very distant, can have significant effect on the sort of overall money available and where budget has to go. That's really interesting. Thank you. And what if we swap it around now? What about people on the commercial or the operations side? What are some good questions that they can perhaps ask of the people on the inverted commas creative side to get more of that perspective?
I think that's just as key, despite the fact that I spent, a long time on the operations side of the business. I also, as I found myself moving into senior and executive leadership, that I was kind of sat across the two, right? So I saw firsthand how important both elements were. Wearing that hat, then I think looking over, sometimes it can be difficult to understand what the creative vision is. So I think they need to ask questions to understand that. I.e., if you've got a particular element, might be an aerial element, might be a costuming element, it might be a signature moment in whatever you're trying to produce. What's the vision for that? What's the purpose behind it? So trying to get a bit of understanding, not just why you're spending X amount on X, just what is this trying to achieve in the overall vision of what you're trying to do. Help me understand that. Bring me on the journey with you, because then I'm going to be much more on the same page and able to work with you to make that happen. For example, if
Right.
you need a bit more money on that bit because it's so important to the overall creative vision, great, let's work together. We've got some, room over there. We can move things, because again, that links into what the final product is going to be, and a happy guest, whoever the end user might be, and the client as well. Those have always got to be the forefront of your mind. And if you can be on the same page with what you're trying to achieve, to achieve that at the end, then brilliant. Invariably, you're going to have a successful project, I would say.
Um, I love that you just mentioned that so casually, that doing the work that you're doing, I suppose you've always got those sort of twin audiences, haven't you? Or twin
Yeah.
sales, in fact, like the sale to the client and then also
Yes.
that sort of
And they're not
second.
always the same.
No, of course not. Yeah.
Yeah, and that can, that's absolutely a challenge. A client could think and want one particular thing, and actually, as it transpires, that's not what the end user or the guest wants, or it doesn't work. And of course, that happens. I think where the real skill comes, if you believe what the guest or end user might want or might work, it's been able to bring that client on the journey to believing and thinking that with you. I think that's where the sweet spot can be at times. Not always easy though.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that. What's that lovely line? It's sell them what they want and give them what they need.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
nice.
I think a big thing I've seen over the years in all of the businesses I've worked with actually is sometimes the business or the client sees themselves going to a certain level, right? And that could be changing their guest demographic. That could be changing how they're seen within the wider marketplace. And it's your job to get them there. Now, the difficulty comes is if you supply what they need at the end of that journey now, the guest or end user might not be ready for it. So it's how do you get from here to there? And that might be a bit of a blend of the both. So, I understand you want to be there, but if we supply that straight away, that's going to turn the guests you currently have off. But if you're trying to, evolve the guests and the people you have through your doors, we can work together on that and we can put things in place to get you there.
Yeah, and thank you so much for bringing that up, Steve, because that is huge right now, isn't it? And I just must put a quick tag in that to thank Janine Coombs for the reminder of the sell them what they want and give them what they need thing. That's why that's in my mind. But that process that you've just mentioned there, and again, we can do it. I mean, the two companies where I'm particularly aware of that transition, I mean, they've been thinking about it for more than 10 years, but one would be something like a Warner Hotels type company. And the other was, I remember back, we're talking 15 or so years ago when I was working as a musician for P&O Cruises, they were talking back then about the idea that some kind of a transition was going to happen with who
Yeah.
their customers were. What's interesting is just seeing now completely sort of externally, seeing some of the signs that they've been working through that process. So yeah, let's go for that. Lots of companies are going to be facing exactly that challenge right now, aren't they? Because obviously they all want to look after the clients that the customers, sorry, they've got, and they're aware of this need to bring in perhaps a new audience. So what are some of the things they can think about to balance this sort of tricky transition phase?
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough, and there could be a number of reasons why they're doing that. It could be they want to increase spend by head. It could be they want to increase their perception in the wider marketplace. Could be a number of reasons. I think, in my experience, it doesn't happen overnight. And it's difficult, and you've got to work towards that. But I think you've got to map out a staggered approach. You can't just say, we want to be there, we'll carry on doing this, and one day we'll be there. You've got to have a targeted and mapped out approach in all areas. And I don't mean just, going back to the creative and operations side of this. The creative will likely evolve and change over time. So what do we do now? So, if we're talking, let's say 5 years, we don't change after 4.5 years. We start evolving things now. So how do we evolve that offering, the particulars of the offering? And then saying, with the people involved in it, take payroll. Payroll might have to increase. It might have to decrease depending on where you're at, because, it's not always one way. Sometimes you might, for example, go from being a luxury brand and you want to be a more budget, affordable brand. So I think there's various elements that you need to put into place, but it's got to start. It's got to start, and you've got to have a targeted approach. And as the supplier, you've got to be on that journey with the client from the outset. You have to know exactly where they want to go, and you've got to let them know and believe that you're going to support them getting there. And that's again through openness and communication. Where do you want to be? How can we help you get there? Because that's what we're here to do.
Steve, yeah, that's great. And that's so interesting is because there are more companies and organizations that are in that challenge now. And I wonder if a lot of them don't actually realize or haven't prioritized dealing with that challenge. If I think about even just if I even just think about sort of local, like regional theaters, for example, um, the audience that still gets the program delivered, the schedule delivered in the mail
Yeah.
is sadly not going to be with us forever. And I wonder what is being done or how much of a priority bringing in other sections of the community.
That's a real interesting one. It take me and my wife, we go theatre quite often, usually 2, 3, 4 times a month, and whether that be in the West End, 'cause we're not far, or if we go on a tour. I remember when I first used to start going theatre, I'd get a program for every single show I saw, and I stacked them up and did nothing with them. But now what we'll do before the show, usually during the interval as well, we're just online looking at the cast and creative, because you can essentially you can access a lot of the info that we wanted from the program. You can
Yeah.
access that, even
Yeah.
the list of what's going on. I think more and more companies as well. The expectation is through apps and that kind of stuff, and that obviously comes with investment and ongoing maintenance and management. But I think that's ongoing. I mentioned it earlier, but I go on holiday to Disney World, and that's massively reliant on my phone now and the app, and getting in queues for rides, booking meals, and all that sort of stuff. They've evolved over time because they had to. And it's that, you need to innovate and evolve and move things forward. Otherwise, you'll just get left behind. And I don't know the figures, but I'll be interested in the figures in terms of the percentages of theatre goers that bought programs versus now. I'm fairly sure that it would be on the
Mhm.
decline. I would think.
If we just move on a little bit now, and from your perspective, what are the biggest challenges in the work that you do, or rather the work that your clients are doing?
Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges now compared to, say, 10 years ago?
I'm a big believer. I think a lot of the time things come back to people and the people element, right? Um, and I think the workforce is different now. I think there's a different mentality, different expectations. When I think back when I started working on a holiday park, I had no idea of the hours I was doing, nor did I care. I just cracked on and do it, and I kind of was in disbelief that I was being paid to do it because I loved it that much. And that's not to say that anybody now doesn't love it in the same way, but we're much more conscious, aware of our well-being and our mental health. I think that's massively evolved over the time, um, which is positive, absolutely. And so I think, but that of course brings challenges as well, because sometimes we have things that need to get done, or we might not have the resources, and um, you know, people are spending less as a result. People have less to spend in terms of what they might be putting on stage, or environments and that kind of stuff. So that's of course a challenge. And I think as well, you know, creatively as well, a lot of the time I hear it quite a lot, and I have heard it quite a lot over the years, is we want something new and different. Um and the at some point it's going to be difficult to find what's new, or it's something you need to be creative with, because there's different ways of doing things. Immersive theatre and immersive entertainment has massively come on over the last few years, and guests and end users, their expectations are changing. I think all of our expectations are changing of what entertainment is, and what we consider to be an acceptable level of things that we're consuming. So I think that's evolving all the time, and I think you've got to evolve with it. And AI is playing its part, and I absolutely think AI's got a part to play. Um, and I'm careful mentioning that, because that might bleed into another 5 podcasts. I'm fully aware of that. But in terms of that, I'm a big fan, if used in the right way, and I think it should enhance what we're doing, not replace what we're doing. But yeah, I think there's a lot to be aware of as we move forward. Definitely.
Hmm. So what would be an example of a way that we people can look to use AI to enhance what we're doing?
I think AI, like I say, I think it should absolutely work alongside what we're doing. So I think it might. I think the human element needs to absolutely remain and play its part, but I think it can structure things for you. I think, interestingly, there's a lot. I try and be quite active, or as active as I can, on LinkedIn, and there's a lot of really polarizing posts I've noticed. People either either love AI or they hate AI. There's not much in between, and people seem to have got a real bee in their bonnet about posts that are written with AI. And I think that's a great example, because if there's a completely emotionless post, if you're putting in AI, write a post for me, with some prompts, and it writes a post. I mean, generally, I think people can see through that. But I've got no issue with AI supporting you with a post. You might have an idea, you might structure it, and you might work with AI to clean it up a little bit, or ensure the focus is in the right place. I've got no issues with that at all. But I can see where frustrations might come, because suddenly there's a lot of people that are experts that maybe weren't before that kind of support was available. So I think we need to be careful with it. I think we need to tread carefully, but also we have to lean in, because one thing is for sure, is not going anywhere. And our
Mm.
kids and the next generation, they're going to grow up with this. That's what we haven't had. We haven't grown up with it. So they are going to do that. So expectations will be different. They will be using it in a way that we probably won't. So
Yeah.
I think we absolutely need to lean into that.
So, so leaning in is a lovely way of putting it, isn't it? So, what would be an example within entertainment? Let's say within parks, or uh, yeah, that those kinds of environments, or um, amusements, or whatever it is. What would be an example of a way to lean into AI?
I think you might. I think it can help with brainstorming. I think with the creative elements, you could sort of run ideas through it, and it might help. I know the early stage of the creative process, there's quite a lot going on. I mean, I remember working with people years ago where they'd have flip chart paper surrounded a wall. I remember going into a wall once with this really brilliant creative person I worked with, and she had all the walls in the room were just covered in flip chart paper with different ideas. And the way I saw that at the time was almost like her brain plastered onto the walls. Um, so I think it can help with structure around that. You might use all of that elements, because um, on the flip chart paper example, and feed it all into you might use a new chat, and I think you can use that to help hone in on exactly what you're trying to achieve as well. Again, being really careful to not replace that human element, but to, it can almost sense check and support what you're doing.
Hmm.
Definitely.
So, when you're talking about AI, are you talking about are you thinking large language models? So what you're talking about there is the sort of behind the scenes process of creating a thing, like where it can support with that.
Yeah, I think so. The early stage development, I think it can definitely help with that. And also, I think with structure and moving over to the more logistical ops side of the business, I think it can massively help in terms of it's simply saving time. For example, creating a spreadsheet with the prompts you want, or a structure for a deck, that kind of thing. It can help do the time consuming bits. We've all spent hours on end at a spreadsheet, and the sums aren't working, or some, there's a number that's off and you don't know where the issue is. That's where AI can really support and help with those time consuming elements. And I don't think there's anything controversial about that. I think that's purely saving time, and as a result making you more efficient. So I don't see how anyone could have an issue with that.
Yeah, no, it's fab. Thank you. And so you talked about some of the challenges there, and you mentioned, or you didn't name it, but the sort of the larger economic situation, the sort of cost of living type stuff, like people spending less, having less to spend, the knock-on effect of that on budgets. What would be some big sort of myths, do you think, within entertainment, attractions, all that kind of stuff? What are some myths, perhaps, that might be holding people back?
Yeah, I think the whole blanket approach to people are spending less. I think that's almost a dangerous sort of thing to put out, because I I'm not sure it's necessarily as simple as that. I think people are being more considered. I think that's what it is. And I'm a family man myself. I've got two young kids. We're not flippant about where we spend our money and what we go do with our time, but we are certainly considered. if I'm going to go and spend X amount on an attraction or a thing, then I want to ensure I'm getting the best value for money. I think there's an appetite for value for money more than there has been in years gone by. So I think I I'm not sure it's necessarily as simple as people are spending less. I think it's more about we're being much more considered, and rightly so. We all, we all work hard for the money we earn, so we want to ensure that we're not wasting that. We're doing the best experiences we can for us and for our kids and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's definitely one, I think.
So there's a balance somewhere, isn't there, between being being aware of current what would be easy to call the current realities, which obviously is a matter of perception, isn't it? But then also not going too far down that way of thinking that maybe you ignore other realities, like the fact that people are still coming. There are people still coming out and spending their money. My partner Jess has a great line that I've heard her say a few times. It's if someone starts talking to her about people having less money and cost of living and all this kinds of things, it's not that we're denying that it's a thing. We're not suggesting that there's no truth to it at all. But she will literally turn around on the high street and point out the fact that on this nice day, all of the restaurants are full, all of
Yeah.
the cafes are full. Now I know that's not universally true everywhere, but still, that there are people out spending money. There are people out that want these experiences for their family and so on. So yeah, thank you for raising that perspective. Anything else on the myths front, do you think?
I think recruitment is something that's become much more considered, and I think I even spoke about it, about maybe the workforce has changed and that kind of stuff. And I think I think the younger generation now, I think there can be a bit of bad press uh, with them, but I'd be loath to tar them all with the same brush, because there's some brilliant people still, and some really hardworking younger people. So I think I'm not sure if I'd say it's a myth, but the idea being that we can't get the value from the people we employ anymore. I don't think that's the case. I just think we've got to look a little bit harder. I think recruitment is not easy, and I think you need to put the time in. You'll get out of it what you put in, and I think that's being upfront and honest with the ads that you put out, the job descriptions, being
Mhm.
realistic as well. I think sometimes you see some job descriptions and ads, and the reality is very different to what's being portrayed. So I think if you can be open and honest about that, because roles are ever changing as well. I don't think it's really I don't think roles are pigeonholed into certain areas, like maybe perhaps they once were. I think there's a much more varied element to work now, and I think that's something that again, being aware of, I think, is only going to help.
Yeah, and thank you. And you mentioned something about that a little bit earlier on when you talked about some of your earlier work in entertainment. Um, that idea of you weren't really sort of tracking how many hours you'd worked, and you were just kind of, a thing needed doing, so that there was something like, so I sort of mucked in and just got stuff done. And you mentioned, I mean, it was my word, but you were talking about that idea of enrollment.
Yeah,
Um, and I guess that's the same thing for those young people now, isn't it? It is harder to enroll people in the work beyond just the money we're going to exchange for
yeah.
their time. So yeah, that's
Yeah, that's
yeah,
I don't think that's no longer enough to just tell people what you're going to pay them. They want to know what they're going to be a part of. Are they going to be important to what you're doing? And of course, the salary and payment and stuff is a part of it. Of course, it is, but it's not. I don't believe it's not in the same way as maybe it perhaps once was.
hmm. Yeah, thank you, Steve. And as we sort of move to close this, thanks so much for your time today. What would you like to see happen in the industry as a whole, so that we can all move forward? And that's sort of the idea of the rising tide lifting all boats.
I think I think we've got to be more open. I think we can be with each other. What we spoke about in terms of the departments and that kind of stuff, working together, and I think open to um, collaboration as well. I think there's certainly and same. There's a lot of companies that deliver a lot of things, and it can be quite siloed. And um, whereas actually, I think there's opportunity. I'm a few projects now I've collaborated and worked with some different companies on, and once upon a time, might have been an environment where that wasn't the case. Whereas that's absolutely what I want to do. I put some I have some values when I put next phase together, and when I was thinking about that, it was one of the first thing I did. But what is my vision? What is my vision for next phase? I understood that I wanted to. It was my next phase in terms of moving out of a job role and a corporate and then privately owned environment. I was moving into my next phase in terms of owning and running a business. But I really wanted to help people get to their next phase as well. Hence where the name come from. And I think I do believe, and that's part of my vision, is to help shape a more thoughtful, collaborative, and sustainable future for entertainment. And I think that's really key. I think we want it to be sustainable. We don't want people to stop spending money on entertainment. And if we take uh, theme parks as an example, we don't want them to focus all the money on rides and the peripherals around it. We want entertainment to be a part of it. Same as holiday parks. It could be on the environment, the pools and the restaurants and all the subsidiary elements. We want these venues full of people, and we're spending money there as well. And I think that's only going to come from collaborating and working together for it to be sustainable. So that was a big part of what I wanted to do. And I think, as we discussed as well, I think there's three elements of how it's all got to work. It's got to work creatively, it's got to work operationally, and it's got to work commercially. Those three elements have to be strong in terms of what we're doing. And if one falls down, they all fall down. And I think that's really, really important. I think it's easy to get lost in the importance of one area of a business, particularly in entertainment business. Is those elements have to be really strong, and then you've got to lead with the values that you want to represent you and your brand, because ultimately that's what it's about. Like I said right at the start, we spend a long time in the roles that we do, doing the work that we do. So if it's not honest in terms of who we are and what we are, then what's the point, really?
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. That's great. Now, one question that I normally ask people at the top, but we just got straight into it, which was great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as we bring this to a close, then what is a recent live event that you've attended as an audience member that really stands out to you?
So for me, I'm not sure what we're going to class as recent, but it was a couple of years ago.
Take the word recent out, pick anything you like.
Yeah. So something that really stuck out for me, I went with my wife. I was a big fan of Peaky Blinders, and they had a live immersive event in London. I think it was Camden Way. And it was honestly one of the best events I think I've ever been to. It was about 2 or 3 hours, and the whole thing was set up like you are dropped into the environment of Peaky Blinders. And it was quite modular as well. So you'd walk around, they'd have the characters who were amazing. They'd have the characters from the show, and you'd walk into different environments. And there was a sort of a little betting shop that you could go in and you could place some bets with these tokens you had. But whilst things were still going on in other areas of the building as well. And then at one point we were come and asked to if we wanted to go see a different area on the quiet. We're taken out of the building into another building that we didn't even think was part of the experience. Then we was taken to a totally different area of the performance, all while different things were going on. One point we was taken up to Tommy Shelby's office, but only select people were chosen to take up there. And I was just fascinated with the fact that other things were still going on. So of all these people that were here, it might have been, 300-400 people that were involved in the particular showtime. We were all getting a different experience. And I thought, it fascinated me because I wanted to know logistically the ins and outs of how this was all put together. I can't imagine it was a cheap experience put together by any means. But it was so cleverly done and well put together. And I think that leans into what we were talking about earlier, where expectations have changed and we want more bang for our buck, but people will still spend the money. It wasn't a cheap ticket by any part, but I've told everyone about it, and I think it was more than value for money. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. The people involved, hats off to them, and the performers were brilliant as well. And I think it was such a overall event that was done brilliantly in all areas that I just thought that was I'm not sure what the future of the show is. I don't think it's there anymore. I'm not sure if it's coming back and where, but if it does, 100% get yourself to it, because it was absolutely brilliant. So that definitely comes to mind. And then alongside of that, I'm a big fan of Disney and going to Disney resorts and the parks. I just think they've got it right, and they do so much so good that those are the things that immediately come to mind, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think we spent like a good 40 minutes in a previous chat, didn't we, talking about how much we both appreciate some of the ways that Disney does things. That's wonderful. Yeah, everyone I've spoken to that's mentioned the Peaky Blinders thing has loved it. That's fab. And where can people learn more about you and about Next Phase Entertainment and how to work with you and all that kind of stuff?
Well, as I said before, it all starts with a conversation, right? In whatever we're doing. I've also recently launched my website, so nextphaseentertainment.co.uk. You can find everything there. The way I've structured the website, I was again quite sort of set on. I wanted that to be clear. I've used too many websites over the years that I've kind of thought, what is it you're doing? So I've structured it into sections in terms of who we are, what we do, how we do it, and then perhaps the most important one, why we do it, which I've touched on there. And then it's got some of the usual things in there that the clients I've worked with, some testimonials from some key figures that I've worked with over the years, and my contact. So my email's on there as well, steve@nextphaseentertainment.co.uk. So drop me a message. I'm quite active on LinkedIn as well. Drop me a message there. I'm super keen to work with people and help with what they're doing. I've kind of said it from the outset. If I can help and believe I can add value, brilliant, let's do this. If not, that's not a problem. I'll wish you the best of luck with what you're doing. But it all starts with a conversation, whether that's an email, a message on LinkedIn, or we can do an old-fashioned phone call as well. Either of those, yeah, I'm open to.
That is fantastic. And I'll make sure all of those links go in the show description and the show notes. Steve Caswell, thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for whatever you do to make live entertainment happen. If you'd like to be notified when there's a new episode and stay up to date with the podcast, you can sign up for the Entertainment Matters Q sheet at the link in the description. Have a great show.